It's my pleasure to invite Dr. Mary Grace today with us, who is a Professor 1 at the Counselor Education Area, College of Education, University of the Philippines, Diliman. She teaches counseling and research courses at the undergraduate and graduate levels. Ma'am holds several qualifications, including a doctorate in special education. Ma'am has rich experience as a class teacher, guidance counselor, and administrator in the basic and tertiary education settings. She also assesses and manages children with disability and in conflict with laws. It's a pleasure to have you with us, ma'am. Before I hand over the podium to ma'am, I would like to inform you all that the workshop is for 2 hours, 1 hour of knowledge sharing by the expert, and the other hour where all your questions would be answered. Wishing you all a very happy learning. Over to you, Dr. Grace.
Okay, thank you very much, Shivani, for that very warm introduction. And I would like to thank and welcome all our guests today. I would like to acknowledge the participants coming from India, Pakistan, Bhutan, the United States, UK, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. Thank you very much from Abu Dhabi. Thank you very much for coming to today's webinar, a workshop, and we will be learning today about memory. Of course, I would like to welcome you first, and then as I welcome you, let's have a short check-in activity. Check-in activities are very important during the new normal. Why? We need to know the condition of people, and we need to know if people are okay or if some of the members in class are having some problems. We have here a check-in activity. I would be posting a Mentimeter link online on the chat box. So I'd like to check in on how are you today. We have a Mentimeter activity. I have posted the link on the chat box. So let's have some interaction. I know that we are from different countries and sometimes it's difficult for us to communicate and we feel that we are far apart. But even if we are far apart, we are close at heart. And we can do check-in activities. This is a strategy that we can use. So we have here, what is your emoji today? Participants are filling in their responses. People are happy, sad, calm. Yes, it is also okay to feel angry during this time. It's okay to feel sad. Emotions are there, and as I have discussed to you in the previous modules, that we have emotions, and these are a part of our life. It's important that we recognize the presence of emotions, but we always balance our emotions. We always acknowledge them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we would be overwhelming them. I would be talking to you more about emotional and behavioral disorders in the future ability webinars. I also have a series on that, a workshop on that. So we have here 111 participants feeling happy. Yes, there are people feeling sad and feeling angry, and there are people who are feeling calm. Thank you very much for participating. And it is indeed uh, a knowledge for everyone that during these times, these are difficult times, these are abnormal times, we can have different emotions. For people who are feeling sad and angry, I would suggest that you do some soothing activities. And we have talked about some gratitude practice in the previous webinars. It's also time for you to identify the things that have made you smile during a day. Let's remember that a bad day isn't necessarily a 100% bad day. There are some instances that made us smile even if we had a very difficult day. So without further ado, I would like to start on the strategies and techniques in improving memory skills among children with special needs. And yes, if you will ask me, this could also be used for children in the regular class. So these are some techniques to improve memory skills. So let's have a recap before that. We have here that there are special needs conditions in a mainstream school, and these were discussed to you in the previous modules. We have cognitive skills development, and the month of November, we had a lot of strategies there for cognitive development. There's also insight into academic difficulties and the tools to identify the academic difficulties. You were acquainted to a lot of checklists, a lot of scales in the previous webinar series. And we had strategies to improve on attention, perception, and thinking. Those were the topics that were discussed in previous webinars. Now, we also discussed here the importance of assessment. I have here a framework. I found here a very lovely framework that identifies the role of assessment in teaching. In the previous webinars, we have discussed that there are different forms of assessment. Assessment could be for diagnostic purposes. It could also be used to identify if the students have understood their lessons well. So we have here a model on the roles of assessment in teaching. We have here integrating instruction and assessment, and it would identify the realities of teaching, and of course, it gives you decision-making skills. Of course, the factors influencing assessment would be 21st century knowledge and whatever new knowledge is being learned at this point. And then we have researches on learning and motivation. We have students' perceptions on assessment, and then the recent trends. We have now alternative forms of assessment. We are not sticking to the traditional assessment of paper and pencil tasks. But these paper and pencil tasks, we should not shelve. These have a lot of significance when it comes to assessment. Of course, assessment is very necessary because we give grades to our students. And of course, during this time also comes the need for teacher assessment, and a lot of governments are having standards for professional teachers. Now, I will give an overview of today's session. And foremost, I will be talking about memory. Memory as a cognitive skill, the importance of memory, the types and phases of memory, and the strategies to improve memory. There are different literature available on memory, particularly in developmental psychology textbooks. Let us bear in mind that there are times wherein the authors would say different classifications, and that is acceptable. So let's review. First and foremost, let's talk about cognitive skills. Cognitive skills are how the brain understands and processes new information and recalls past knowledge to help one successfully live their life. So if one doesn't have cognitive skills, you won't be able to do a lot of skills that you are doing at a day-to-day basis. And then cognitive skills also include the ability to learn, to process and apply knowledge, to analyze and reason, and to evaluate and design. So for example, the students come to your class. Of course, they listen to your lesson. Is it on addition, subtraction, multiplication? Is it on science like photosynthesis? Is it a practical application or on health or mathematics? So when they come to the classroom, they learn. They learn the skills, they learn the topics. And then afterwards, they think of it and they process it in their minds. And when they go out of the classroom or during your test, your formative assessment, hopefully they are able to apply this knowledge by being able to answer. And of course, in real life situations, you use this knowledge to cognitive skills to solve practical problems that we have. And of course, we all make our decisions also based on cognitive skills. These are core cognitive skills, and we will be talking about it all throughout the module. So we have here attention, thinking, perception, and memory. The topic for today is on memory. So what is memory? There are two major classifications of memory. If you say memory, you are talking about short-term memory and long-term memory. So let's talk about short-term memory. So this refers to the ability to store a small amount of information in our minds and help it to be there, and it has to be there for a short period of time. Let's remember that this is very brief. For example, in short-term memory, someone gives you his or her phone number. So when you have that short-term memory active, you are able to recall that information. And it is there only for a short period of time. Tomorrow, when you are asked, what is the phone number of so and so? You won't be able to answer anymore because it is just stored in your short-term memory unless you have memorized it. So short-term memory is very brief and it is limited. And then number two, you have long-term memory. So long-term memory have here the storage of information over an extended period of time. So you have here explicit. So in explicit memory, you have the consciousness that you have it. For example, you have an episodic memory wherein you have events, and then you have a semantic memory. So you have a knowledge about the world. I'll be talking about that further in the next slides. So let's define memory. So memory, when you say memory, it refers to a multitude of human capacities. So memory cannot be boxed. It has a multitude of human capacities. In fact, I have been administering standardized tests. Working memory is an essential component of intelligence, and I have seen the various forms of tests that are presented. Later, I will be giving you some tests that I have personally developed. These are some tests that we will be using for the purposes of these sessions, but these are adapted from many kinds of standardized tests. So later on, I will be giving you a hands-on on the different types of tests that could be used for memory. And then there are different kinds of memory. There's no single type of memory. And in the literature, there is no generally agreed on classification of the kinds of memory that exist. And many categorizations are there, and there is no agreement of experts as to which classification is the best. So that's memory. And as a result of the memory, we learn. We show an enduring and obvious change in the behavior, capacities, and responses because we can remember what we have learned. It is stored in our memory. So, because of memory, we can have changes in behavior. We have applications of skills because of memory. So, memory is an essential part of the cognitive process. So without memory, we won't be able to retain the information that we have learned in school. Memory is the sum total of all our life experiences, which are also crucial in shaping our identity. Of course, experiences form a part of our memory. Memory plays an important role in concentration because you need that memory and concentration, they go together. They help It helps in following instructions and it facilitates learning subject areas. Of course, it includes reading and mathematics. How could you recall the things that were learned? And then we have some key features of the main types of memory. So these are the types of memory. So you have episodic. Is it explicit or is it implicit? So when you say explicit, it is conscious. When you say implicit, it is unconscious. For example, an example of an implicit form of memory is your ability to drive. So you don't recall, of course, the steps of driving, but when you really know how to drive, it comes naturally. So it's an implicit form. Procedural knowledge is an implicit form of memory. Now let's look at the different types. You have here episodic. So it is explicit. What is it? What are the main features? The memory for events or episodes. And for example, you remember what you had for breakfast this morning. This is very crucial. And this question is also crucial if you are going to check for neurocognitive disorders. I will not talk about neurocognitive disorders in this segment because we are talking about memory as applied to education, K to 12, from kinder all the way to grade 12, basic education. And then we have semantic memory, which is explicit. This means that we have memory for knowledge and facts. So we remember the date of the Great Fire of London. We remember the date of our independence. So that's semantic memory. And then procedural memory. It is memory for skills and procedures. For example, what will you do when you wash your hands? What will you do if you want to bake a cake or bake bread? What will you do when you are brushing your teeth? This involves procedural memory. And you have autobiographical memory, which is explicit also. This is the memory for our own life experiences. So, for example, you remember the date of your wedding anniversary. You remember your birthday. You remember the birthday of your mother. So, these are the things that are in autobiographical memory. Okay, so let's go to the next assessment. Let's go have an assessment. So let's have an example of our assessment, and you can use the chat box to participate. So we have assessment here because we are trying our best to have an assessment. When you talk about memory scales, you are talking about many facets. Therefore, you can't find a memory test unless you, for example, you say, oh, remember these numbers, remember these letters flash to you. So you won't have a memory test that is written. So let's have an example here. Episodic memory. Let's use the chat box to participate. First question. Okay, what did you eat for lunch today? Rice and dal, bangus, bread, murchat, bento, pork steak, chili pepper, green roti, biryani, pancit, sandwich, pasta, rice and bean, sambar, veggies, apple, potato salad, sinigang, adobo, okay, rice. Okay, chicken, rice and vegetables, rice and eggs, rice and lechon and lumpia. Oh, it's party time. Chapati, rice, roti, and vegetable. So you remember what you had for lunch. And then, what kinds of clothes did you wear yesterday? Could you describe your clothes? Could you describe the color? Could you describe what you wore? For example, I wore a red dress yesterday and it had flowers. So this is also part of episode. Okay, I wore my Thursday uniform. Very good. My Thursday uniform. Okay. Yes. So the question, steam fish. That's they're still answering the first question. The red shirt, denims and pink top. Yes. Okay, cotton white shirt, red shirt, formal blue pants, my uniform, mustard colored sari. Wow. Orange top and pants, black pants and beige top. Okay. Blue t-shirt, green shirt, blue salar kamage, going kira. Very good. I don't remember. Blue polo uniform, blue hanging shirt. Okay, thank you. And what did you watch on television last night? Korean drama, Final Plate, Hawkeye, Alison Gray, football, Turkish series, Korean drama, Squid Games. Okay, Joker, news, sitcom, cartoon, Netflix. Okay? So these are the things under episodic memory. Take note for people who are suffering, who are being assessed for neurocognitive disorders. These are also asked because they are the doctor is trying to identify, the neurologist is trying to identify if there is a problem in episodic memory. So these are very simple tasks, simple questions that are asked. Okay, so we have here semantic memory. So these are facts. So what is the date of independence in your country? So we have semantic memory. Okay, what is the date of independence in your country? So let's have the answers. June 12, October 1, August 14, August the 10th, 26 March, 17th December, June 12, 15th of August. Okay, 15th of August. Okay. So you can remember. And when did you learn this? You learned this perhaps in elementary school. And then who is the national hero of your country? Okay, Jose Rizal, Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, Gandhi. Okay, King. Hey, very good. You remember. Jose Rizal, Nehru, Iman Kam, Sandar Patel, Mahatma Gandhi Jr., Rajendra Prasad. So you are able to recall the national hero. Okay. So next, who was the first man on the moon? Of course, it is Neil Armstrong. You are able to recall this information. We have a very good group. You can recall the facts that you have learned in elementary. Very good. Okay, that's semantic memory. Now, we have a more challenging behavior. We have more challenging memory game. So let's have procedural memory. So in procedural memory, I have here the steps in washing your hands. I will be showing you the steps in washing your hands. Okay, now let's go to the assessment. Okay. Oops, sorry. Oops. Here. For procedural memory. So could you arrange the steps in washing your hands? So what are the steps? You have here wash, scrub, spread, rinse, lather. So could you arrange here the steps? Okay, so lather, scrub, spread, wash. Okay, you rinse. Okay, so very good. Okay, you wash, you lather, and you scrub. Okay, so let's look at the results. So of course, when you say these are the steps, you are referring to, okay, 5, 5, 2, 3, 1, yes. So we have here the answers. Very good. Okay, very good. So you wash. Okay, here. And then we have here autobiographical information. I won't be letting you use the chat box for purposes of data privacy. Do not put your autobiographical memory here or the name of your father, the city, for purposes of data privacy. You can answer this on your own. So when is your birthday? Who is your father? In what city you were born? And how old are you? I won't be asking you to put the information on the chat box for data privacy purposes, for autobiographical memory, because you might be a victim of phishing if I let you post your birthdays, your father's name, the city where you are born. But these are the questions that are asked for autobiographical memory. Here, I won't let you answer. Please do not answer in the chat box because you might be a victim of phishing. I don't want to have that to happen to you. So we have here the 3 stages of memory. So what are the 3 stages? You have to encode, and then you store, and then you retrieve. Of course, you see it. When you see it, you encode it. Somehow you process it. So when your teacher presents a math lesson, you're trying your best to understand it. And you are trying your best to remember it in order for you to retrieve it and use it one day. And hopefully you get all the answers correct and you remember everything. Okay, so the 3 stages of memory. So we have encoding. It is the first stage of the memory, of the information processing in our memory, where information is taken in via the senses. So you encode. So sometimes you see and you hear. The technique is to have many senses available. So we have VAKT, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile. So you learn best if you make use of all the senses. You learn best also if you immediately teach what you have learned. And then storage is the second part of the information processing in memory, by which information is retained for a short period or a long period. Sometimes if you don't like the subject matter that is taught to you, you won't remember it. You don't want to. After one semester, 1 year, you don't remember it anymore because it's not interesting to you. And then retrieval. This is the third stage of information processing in memory, by which information is brought back out of storage and then it is recalled. So you retrieve that, especially during test. When you were taking your test, you had to remember what you have learned. Okay. So we also have such a thing called working memory. So when we have working memory, it's a theoretical set of structures and processes where information is temporarily stored and processed. So when it comes to working memory, if you have standardized tests, the examiner might be asking you to recall a series of numbers. Let's say, for example, 8, 7, 2. So what did I say? So the answer is 8, 7, and 2. So you have structures and processes that are stored. And working memory can be described as limited, okay? In a limited amount of information that can be temporarily maintained and is accessible, making use for some cognitive task. So in standardized tests, you are shown pictures, you are given numbers, you have memory for sentences. So these comprise working memory. Okay? There's an impact of having poor working memory. When you have poor working memory, it can cause you difficulties in sustaining attention. So you cannot focus because you cannot focus on the lesson because you have forgotten the first step in the math problem, remembering information. So if there is a pop quiz, there's a formative quiz right after the lesson, you have forgotten everything already. And then you solve mathematical calculations. And if you don't have a good working memory, you cannot solve your math problems. You could also have problems in remembering the details of activities of more than one steps. Or if someone asks you to do something, let's say, for example, you are asked by your mother to have a series of tasks done, you won't be able to do it because of poor working memory. You won't be able to remember. And then following instructions in a sequence. So if you have poor working memory, that would be a problem. So research, what does research say? Children with poor working memory may struggle in reading, in mathematics, and it has been suggested that they are likely to have poor academic progress. This is the significance of having good memory. So if you have good memory, you can do better in mathematics because you can recall the procedures. So let's go to assessment. Okay. So we have here the phonological store of numbers, letters, and sentences. So we will have our simple assessment on working memory. So with that, I will give you, of course, you will not see the assessment here. I will not write it down because it is an assessment. So, so now you have to get ready because I will be giving you a sample assessment in working memory. So the first type of assessment is numbers. So the first working memory assessment would be numbers. Your task is to remember and your task is to put it on the chat box. Okay, are you ready now? Let's begin. So focus because I will be giving you an assessment on working memory. The numbers are 7, 4, 3. Okay. Okay, very good. People got it. 8, 9, 5. Okay, very good. So you got it. Now I will give you a combination of letters and numbers. Are you ready? 598J. Okay, very good. 6A92C. Okay, very good. So you now have here memory that you are remembering a sequence of numbers and a sequence of letters. And then we have here the combinations of numbers and letters. And then let's have a sentence. Okay, ready? The dog barked loudly yesterday. What did I say? Okay, very good. The dog barked loudly yesterday. You have good memory for sentences. Very good. Okay, so these are sample tests that you give at the C level. I modified some of it, of course. I didn't give you the exact tests because that would be a threat to validity. And then we have another interesting working memory test. This time, you can make use of the markings on your cell phones. So we have here visual and spatial information. Are you ready for it? Okay. I have here a series of checks in the boxes. I will be exposing this to you after I talk for 5 seconds. And I would like you to recall the boxes that have checks on them. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now try to remember which boxes had the check marks on them. Okay? And of course, your answer, your answer should match this. Okay? Thank you very much. That is a type of assessment. In Stanford Binet 5, you tap the blocks. Okay, so I have here another form of assessment. So we have here memory for objects. This is not the exact test, but this was used in a previous version of an intelligence test. I really like giving this type of assessment because it would identify the sequence of things. This somehow you have more concrete objects compared to letters and numbers. So what was the sequence of the objects flashed? Okay, so sorry. So remember the sequence of the objects flashed. Sorry about that. Are you ready? Let's start. What was the sequence of the objects flashed? You could write down in the chat box. Okay. Okay, bird, pencil, clock, and bag. Bird, pencil, clock, and bag. Very good. So you could recall the sequence of the pictures that were flashed. Very good. Terrific. That is part of one intelligence test, but that's not used anymore. Of course, I changed the pictures. Yes. So very good. We were able to recall the Okay, one even has, Irene even has the pictures ready. Wow. Thank you very much. She even has the pictures ready. Okay. So these are some strategies that we can use to improve memory. So first, rehearsal. Okay? Repetition of information in a deliberate attempt to aid the memory. Sometimes when you repeat, you create a story of it, you create a song. You could also repetitively say the specific things that you have to remember. Okay? Remember that when you are given a series of numbers, let's say, for example, a telephone number, and you're trying to get a piece of paper. So between the person telling you that telephone number and getting the paper, sometimes you have to recall and you have to retell the number again and again in yourself with, so that you will be able to write down that information called for. So repetition. So you can deliberately repeat or rehearse the information. Some would act, some would have, for example, walk around in order for them to enhance their retention of the knowledge that is being learned. And then this is one of my favorite strategies, mnemonics. So these are important strategies which act as memory aids, and this increases encoding strategies for children. So have you ever had PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally? So this is for your math. So it symbolizes parentheses and then exponent and then multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. So you have PEMDAS. So that's a mnemonic device. Okay. Or for example, if you will be talking about the the staff, the music lines. So every good boy does fine, and then FACE. So you would remember the notes. And then this is also another mnemonic strategy. So if you forget how many days are there in a month, you could do January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and then August, September, October, November, December. So you would see here that if it is, if the month falls on the bone, you have there 31 days. So that is also a mnemonic device in order for you to understand how many days are there in a month. So mnemonics are fun. So you can make use of a lot of mnemonics. Could you give me examples of mnemonics that you are using? Yes, Vigor. Okay, the to remember the colors of the rainbow. What else? Okay, Vibgor. Cups for conventions, bodmas, okay, fankoi, fanboys. Always apply this activity, bodmas, Japan, just always pray at night, okay. Using fingers, oh, for the table, okay. SWOT, okay. The face, the fanboys, okay. The man, Mercury, okay. Wrap, read around the text. Okay, water soluble vitamins. Okay, fast. Very good. So you have there mnemonic devices that you use. So you are very familiar with mnemonics. And of course, learning rhymes. So this strategy I learned in grade 4. In spelling, I before E except after C. So for your example, it would be believe, relieve, but not for receive. Could you have some rhymes that you use for learning? You can use the chat box. Okay? Okay, letter B as left hand, letter D as right hand by palm closing, SH. 1, 2, buckle my shoe. Let's have rhymes that are used for learning. Okay, that one. 30 days has September. Okay, very good. So that you can remember The number of days in a month. Oh, B for belly, B for diaper. Okay. Okay. First May Labor Day, second May Day, my day. Okay, joke. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. Okay. Mirror image for B and B, rhyme song for continents. Seashells. No, seashells is not a rhyme that you will use for learning. It is more of something that you will use for tongue twister. Okay, it's okay. If it's not working, I am also reading the responses. Okay. Okay, shy eye through Y. Come, little children, listen to me. Okay, so these are some rhymes that you use. Okay, shy eye through Y. And then there are paired associate tasks. So, for example, for paired associate tasks, it's used to test children's ability to recall pairs of items. And usually these are pairs of words. Children are encouraged to learn the word by pairs by linking them together. So they are linked together and they are forming a visual memory when they are linked together. So, for example, here, socks and shoes. Okay, bread and butter. So in one of the old tests, it says there, bread and meat are good to blank. So bread and meat are good to eat. So we have here a paired associate task. Okay, toothbrush and toothpaste, lock and key, spoon and fork. Okay, for other countries, it's meat on potato. For other countries, it's meat and rice. For other countries, it would be meat and corn. Okay. Forks and spoons, dal and chawal. Okay, rice and chili. So these are the things that go together. Okay, these are pairs. Okay, and then you have contrast, such as day and night, and then you have needle and thread, tables and chairs. So these are paired tasks. So you have here other tips. Okay, shirts and pants, hands and glove, very good. Okay, cup and saucer. Okay, so you have there paired tasks, paired associates. And then these are the other tips. First, focus attention. So if the child, for example, cannot focus, there would be a difficulty in remembering what is learned. There would be an implication on memory. So you need the child to focus. Next is to avoid cramming. When you cram, you get stressed out. Okay? When you get stressed out, you won't be able to think anymore. So let us avoid cramming. Okay? And then there would be structure. You need to structure and organize. Let's say, for example, when the child is learning in the school, you have to structure the things. You have to tell him or her what notebooks gets first. Okay, what notebooks will the child get? So there's notebook number one, number two, and number three. Or what will the child choose? Is it pencil? Is it ball pen? So there is a way of organization in the bag. There is a way of organization. For example, on the table, on the desk, there would also be organization if you are learning at home. There are still there are still places wherein learning occurs at home because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So when the child is engaged in online learning, the materials have to be placed systematically. So there is a systematic way of placing the materials. So when there is a systematic way of placing the materials, there would be better learning because you won't be looking at other things. You would be focusing on the content that is being taught. And then there is a need to structure and organize, to elaborate and rehearse. So first you structure and then elaborate, you rehearse. You again and again retell, state what is learned. And then you can also visualize what you are learning. You can visualize, for example, the parts of the story that has been read. You can visualize, for example, the experiment or whatever you need to visualize. And then you relate new information to things that are already known. This is the essence on why we have reviews before we teach the next lesson. There is always a review of the previous concept that is taught, and then read out loud. The more senses that we use, the better. We are able to retain more information. One good technique is, I have talked about this earlier, VAKT, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile. How would you present the lesson, particularly to very young children, so that many senses are used? Add in previous knowledge. Yes, you can add to previous knowledge. So we have here some case scenarios, and let us discuss. And of course, let's use your expertise as teachers to help the following. Here is child number one. Student number one needs to be helped. Shalani has difficulties in memorizing the 9 planets in her science lesson. How can you help? Okay, let's use mnemonics. Very good. Okay, poster project. Sing a song about the planets. I like that. Singing a song about the planets. Genevieve, that is a very unique response. Rhymes. Make a jingle with names, witty names. Use music and movement. Mnemonic strategy. Create a chant. Rhyme. Have video clips. Sing a song about the planets. Okay, okay, my very dear mother just showed us, okay, building planets, mnemonics, through songs, rhymes. Okay, MVEM, Sun mnemonic. Okay, pictures, showing pictures, using mnemonics, action songs. Yes, you can use action songs, and little children like that. Using a sensory box to search and remember the planets. Mnemonic, okay, playing with puzzle that involves a planet, creating a song, use picture of a planet and then sing a song, make planet models through movement, draw the 9 planets in a creative way through a project. So many songs about planets in YouTube, through dance, through rhymes, show a live feed from NASA, break into 3 parts, make a picture booklet, planet flashcards, drama, action songs, sing and clap in a sequence, use mnemonics, dramatization, kids acting as planets. Tell the kids M, them is a small guy, J. Make a story making the planets as characters. Make a planet project, watching planets video for kids through a book, building planet models, with different colors. That's very good. Dramatization. Okay. My valuable earning, make job seem useful and nice. All starting letters. Okay. Make a mobile of the planets. Arrange a planet's picture on the table. Sequence a planet. Okay. My very easy method, just speed up nothing. Turn into a memory game. Yes, puppet show, role play, watching a documentary, using short sentences by the dramatic method. Okay. Should know what type of learner Shalani is. Yes, of course. Are you a visual learner? Are you an auditory learner? Are you a kinesthetic learner? That would also be very good. We use task analysis. Someone answered task analysis if we have procedural tasks. In this, we use mnemonics. Okay, thank you very much for presentation, for answering. And then for your answers, we have another child to help. Abhyasa is having difficulty in all the classes. He could not focus. He would go around the classroom and he would immediately forget what has been learned. How will you help Abhyasa? Okay. 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 Assigning a body, yes, that would help. Motivational activity. Find his interest, yes. Give interesting task. Of course, outdoor activities, have some movement activities involved. Building learning stations, okay? A short break would help. Structure chunking the task into small steps, that would also help. Calming activities, yes, that could help initially. Or, for example, have exercises that would make him get rid of the excess energy so that he could focus in class. Okay, attention games, calming down activities, structuring the table, okay, making sure that he's seated in front, that would be a very practical thing to do. Dancing, give him small chores in the classroom. Declutter, yes, have technology, have a shadow teacher address the behavior. Okay, mindfulness practices, brain breaks. Yes, you could have small breaks in between the lessons. Grab attention. Okay, paired peers. Okay, music, redirect his energy. The health break if he's hungry already and the tasks are too long already. So very good. You are able to help Abhyasa. You're giving him a short break, writing it down, creating a picture. Movement-based learning. Show interesting pictures related to the topic. How about calming activities? Okay, these are very good. Okay, so you have short breaks. What is the antecedent of behavior? Yes, we are talking about antecedents and the behaviors and the consequences here. Channeling his energy. Okay, check what kind of learner he is. Attention games. Okay, kinesthetic activities, meditation, cue cards, praising him effectively, the sensory seat. Okay, so for memory, yes, it is the sensory seat, or you could, for example, let him focus and arrange the things and let him simmer down first before he listens to the lesson. Okay, so we have here Anissa. Anissa is having difficulty studying. First, her notes cannot be found. Second, her bag is very messy and disorganized. You also find out that her notes are spread out through several notebooks. How will you help Anissa? Okay, use a color code, declutter, give her organizational tips by labeling, organizing, and structure, color code, counseling, labeling, procedural. Okay, yes, that is very good. You need to enhance organizational skills. Okay, very good. Last executive functioning, making a checklist of the things to do. Okay, organize her things early before going to class. Sequential chart. Bag can be color coded, structure and organize, use rewards. Teach her how to be organized, use different colors. Make a checklist of things. Have a checklist, color coding, scheduling routines and activities, providing time, organizing, engaging her. Okay? Structured activities, color coding. Okay. Feedback. Oh, feedback link. Okay. Check it. Okay. Assign the notebooks, mapping sequentially, time management tips. Okay. Having focus, arranging books, self-assessment checklist, picture blended organizers. Assign a place to keep the notes. Have a lesson about how to organize things, or teacher, use direct instruction on how to organize. Direct instruction will benefit Anissa because immediately you give her the directions on how to organize. Yes, motivation activities. Yes, we need to have more activities on organization. Make her more responsible by guiding her. Okay, so with that, we have here the takeaway. So exactly, I have 1 hour. I have 2 more minutes left. Memory is an important part of our cognitive process, and there are strategies to improve our memory. If there are issues pertaining to memory, formal assessment can be done. So with that, exactly after 1 hour, we will have our interaction. You can ask questions, and you can use the chat box, or we have here some questions that were given in advance.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grace, for a wonderful session. I'm sure the participants thoroughly enjoyed the activities that you have shared with them. So before we move on to the question answer round, I'll just share the few things with the participants, ma'am. I would like to inform you all with regard to the upcoming events that we have. We have a workshop on milestones and prerequisites for English language development on the 16th of December. And on the 21st of December, we have developing listening and speaking skills in children with special needs. They'll be by Madam Geeta Gopi at 4 p.m. Indian time, 5:30 p.m. Indonesia time, 6:30 p.m. Singapore and Philippines time. Do check out the links that are going to be posted in the chat box for these events and share it with anyone who could benefit from it. Moving on, I'll also show you how you could access resources and post your questions. So for step 1, you need to log into your account. After logging in, coming to these tabs, you can come to the questions tab. In the questions tab, you can ask a question regarding the event, and the questions that have the most upvotes will be prioritized and answered by the speaker. Then you have this tab of resources where all the resources relevant to a particular workshop will be posted. The resources for the current workshop are now being posted in the chat box. You could also check out what are the upcoming events that are going to be there. And then you could also come to the related events tag and you could see what are the other events that you could register and be a part of. You can also come to the My Events section and see what all events you have registered for. I would also like to tell you about the initiative where you could be a resource creator with ability. All you have to do is a 3-step process where you need to create your profile and upload the resources that you have either created or curated. Then you would be receiving feedback and ratings from the community. You could build followers to your profile and share these resources with over 40,000 educators and parents. To become a resource creator, you could fill in the form that is being shared in the chat box. Now, without any delay, we would begin our question answer session. Are you ready for it, Dr. Grace?
Yes, I am.
Yes. So we have the first question here by Joanna, who's saying that, ma'am, we have discussed about that there are different types of memory. So when we have to provide memory intervention, which type of memory should we first focus on for children with special needs?
Well, it depends on the needs. So, for example, it depends on the age, it depends on the needs. It also depends, of course, on the type of lessons that have to be taught. So, for example, if the lesson is on identifying the autobiographical information, so you have to focus on that first. Or if your lesson is on colors, you have to focus on that, or sequencing procedural knowledge. So these are the things that you have to focus on when you are teaching. It depends on the lessons, it depends on the age, and there are a lot of factors that are dependent on what kind of memory strategy or what kind of memory will you focus on. Thank you po.
Thank you, ma'am. So a lot of factors play a role. And as you have mentioned about age, so when we talk about age, we have the participant Emma who wants to know what is the extent that age plays a role in providing memory intervention, and how can we develop cognitive skills at different ages? How can we categorize activities for cognitive skills at different ages?
Okay, so first and foremost, memory at what age? I would look at the skills that are needed. Uh, more than the memory part. So for example, if it is a skill on recall, or definitely will have memory. If it is a lesson on recalling the sequences of events or procedural knowledge, definitely you would have to make use of your working memory on procedural skills. If you showed the task and the child has to recall the tasks that are given, definitely you focus on that. But for example, if you are going to teach, for example, vocabulary, how will you teach vocabulary? You teach it, for example, vocabulary in context. You also have to teach, for example, learning different vocabulary words that are used in day to day life. So I would look at the competencies of the lessons first before I identify a particular strategy and before I identify a memory technique that I would use in order for the students to retain that information. And of course, when it comes to memory skills, it, of course, as we grow older, as the child progresses, develops from early childhood to adolescence, the memory skills become more complex. So, as the child grows older, we could teach more subject matter because the brain has the capacity already to absorb information. However, memory, when the person, of course, grows older, it is said that some people, it doesn't necessarily mean that you grow older, you will have a decline in memory. That is not true. So a decline would be indicative of some issues like neurocognitive disorder, which I said I would not be discussing. So going back to the discussion on memory skills for elementary education, for high school, it all is dependent on the lessons that have to be taught. And number two, it is also dependent of the type of learner that you have. You can have a visual learner. So if the child is a visual learner, you have to write things down that the child would be able to read. If the child is auditory, you have to tell the lessons. If the child is kinesthetic, perhaps you should perform, you should be able to problem solve. So it depends on the type of learner and of course your lessons. Of course, it would also depend on ability and maturity and a lot of other things.
Memory intervention is also child specific that way, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah. So now we have a question from a few participants who are asking you about, can you suggest certain ways to improve the visual memory skills in children?
Oh, that is very good, improving the visual memory skills. So, for example, you could expose the child to whatever has to be learned. There might be pictures that have to be learned. Second, as much as possible, you can expose the child to real life situations. So let the child associate that these pictures, these things that are learned in the textbooks, for example, procedures, these are found in real life. And I won't be finding them in textbooks exclusively. I could apply them in real life. And realias, if you will look at the model, the Dale's cone of experiences, realias and real life activities are the best ways for the child to remember. Of course, when you talk about memory and remembering the information that has been learned, we also talk about the technology that is available. So we're asking on the best ways to remember a visual presentation or a visual type of learning. You look at Dale's cone of experience, and you would see here that concrete and real life experience are the best teaching methods, are the best materials for the child in order for him or her to learn.
Now we have a case specific question, ma'am. So this is by Mun Ping Lam. She stated that she has a daughter, she is having a daughter who has a problem with short term memory and slow processing speed. But when the information has been practiced a lot of time and is into long term memory, she shows no deficits. Can you suggest any strategies that could help her improve her daughter's short term memory and processing speed?
Okay, so that is a very good question because sometimes if the child has learned the information and it has been stored in the long-term memory, the child remembers better. So the task here is for you to present, to use as many senses as possible when you learn. So you have visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile. You think of some teaching strategies that would make use of all the senses, of more or most of the senses, in order for the child to be able to retain information and remember what has been learned. And also, immediate application is necessary. So immediately you have to let the child apply. Immediately you have to let the child answer a quiz or answer a specific activity. So that would be the best way for the child to learn.
Immediate application of what is learned will help the child better. Yes. So now we have another question, ma'am. This is by Peter Gay Nelson, who wants to know that for students with cognitive delay, specifically who are in the high school and the middle school level, what are some of the practical tools that they can use to foster the development of students' memory?
Okay, that is very good for cognitive delays. And sometimes that could be an issue for children with intellectual disability. So, for children with intellectual disability, in the literature, it says that the best form of instruction would be direct instruction. You teach in front of the child what has to be learned, and immediately there is feedback coming from the child. You let the child do it. That would be the best strategy in order for the child to remember. Now, when it comes to cognitive deficits, you're talking about disabilities of, let's say, intellectual disability, mild, moderate, severe, and profound levels. You're also talking about learning disability. You're also talking about children who are having difficulties in specific lessons but not necessarily having a developmental delay or not necessarily having intellectual disability or learning disability. So for these types of children, first and foremost, we have to look at the abilities and the disabilities. So, for example, if the child has intellectual deficits, has intellectual disability, definitely you will have to make use of some direct instruction. And you have here various teaching methodologies for these types of learners. You have, of course, your task analysis. You have to chunk also the lessons, etc. And also, you will have to note that if it is an intellectual disability case, there are some things that the child will not learn. Similarly, regular children do not remember everything or do not learn everything. So there would be limitations. So let's always look at the IQ profile and what the child could learn and not learn. And let us not fret over the things that he or she cannot learn, but rather let's focus on the things that can be learned. Now, when it comes to regular children who have have some cognitive issues, for example, not all students are good in a language course or in a mathematical course. So first and foremost, one strategy would be rehearsal. So immediately you rehearse what has been learned. Second, you can use mnemonic devices. Third, you can use peer tutoring. Sometimes the student would learn better using a peer. Fourth is to use instructional materials that are beneficial. So if you will look at the Montessori method, there are didactic materials that are used to teach various concepts. Or you could look at YouTube and you could look at the internet for interactive games that would make learning fun. Just take note that when it comes to learning the interactive way, it would be best for the child to have these technologies available during instruction, but not when giving your quizzes and tests. What has been found out in the literature, if you give these as a means of test, for example, you use an interactive platform for your test, chances are the children would focus on the interactive platform rather than the questions that you are asking. one of my students did a research on that, and the results were that there was a significant difference of those who were given the test using a simple platform, let's say for example a Google document or a Google form, versus the children who had an interactive platform. So you have to take into consideration the types of activities, the technology available, the level of disability, if there is disability, and of course what types of lessons are to be learned.
Yes, focusing on the child's strength and being clear as to what has to be worked upon is very, very important. Now we have a question by Rebecca Iguia, who wants to know that if a child has a problem with sustaining attention, and sustaining attention usually affects their ability to retain information, do we need to address their attention span first, or can it be addressed together? Could you throw some light on it and suggest some activities that we can do?
Okay, for children who have difficulties in sustaining attention, so attention is an executive functioning skill. So sometimes if children have deficits in sustaining attention, I would suggest that you present the tasks in sequence. So task analysis could help. And then you present the task, for example, one phase at a time. You don't present everything at the same time if they are having issues in sustaining attention. Similarly, if you are assessing, you are giving a test to a child who has difficulties in sustaining attention, what do you do? So you could opt, if you have a 50-item test, I could opt as a teacher to give you 10 items at a time. I'll give you 10 items at this sitting, and then I'll let you take a break. I'll give you another 10 items, and then take a break, and then another 10 items, and then you take a break. That is if your child has an issue on sustaining attention. You could give the test in several sittings. So you could have one long test in several sittings. And of course, if it is sustained attention, you could also, for example, um, vary the types of tests that are being answered. So if you have a 50-item multiple choice test and you have a 20-item true or false test, why don't you vary? You let the child answer in sequence of first multiple choice, and then I'll give you true or false, and then we'll go back to the multiple choice. You have given the same test to the child, only that you have presented the information differently. Now, when it also comes to sustaining attention, first and foremost, you could vary the lessons that you have. A lot of children would complain saying that, oh, you know what, the lesson is so boring. That's why I don't want to listen, because the lesson is too boring. I have a difficulty in sustaining attention, in keeping focus, because I don't like the lessons that are taught to me. So perhaps it could be changing the methodology of teaching. There are a lot of creative ways to teach. And of course, Ability has a wealth of resources that you can always consult when it comes to materials on how to teach particular subject matters. So, sustaining attention, sometimes you will have to make the lessons more interesting in order to have sustained attention. And of course, if the problem persists, you have to let the child undergo assessment.
Modification of the information is very important while working with these children and taking it one step at a time. Now, since we've been talking about a lot of strategies, ma'am, we have one participant, Myth Alfrok, who wants to know that when we are implementing so many strategies, how long should we keep on using a strategy to determine if it has been effective or not?
Hey, that is a very good strategy. How long? First and foremost, I would suggest that you consult the literature, because a specific strategy would have its recommendation. For example, you would see here that this strategy was applied to a group of people, and there were 8 sessions. Usually you have minimum of 8 sessions, but usually intervention could last for a month. So you always go to the literature on how long or how short an intervention is. And in order for you to test if it is effective or not, you give a pre-test and then you give a post-test. You compare the pre-test results from the post-test results. And you have to know if the intervention is showing you that there is a difference in scores. Okay, if it is a class, you have a significant difference. Of course, you can compute for paired samples t-test if you are teaching a class, but not when you are teaching an individual student. So how long do you have an intervention? Each intervention, particularly the evidence-based interventions, you will read about them in journal articles. The authors will tell you how long the intervention was applied, and they will tell you, of course, the results. And sometimes they would tell you the population, the samples that would not be effective at all.
Different methodologies have a different timeline. Based on the similar lines, we have a question by Farida Ma'am, who wants to know that when a special educator is trying for so long to help the child memorize, when does a special educator accept the fact that this strategy is not working and the child is not able to go beyond a particular point, and that the child should not be pushed more towards it?
Oh, that is a very good question. So, first and foremost, I would go on the significance of memorizing. So, what is the significance of that memorizing? Will you use that as an activity of daily living? Will you let that is that skill important in order for the child to survive everyday life? So, if yes, you continue on teaching the skill, or you continue on teaching the skill little by little. Sometimes it would take you weeks or months before that skill is taught. So, for example, if you have taught for several times and the child has not gotten the answer correctly and you have exhausted all methodologies, you have read everything, and the child won't be able to answer it, perhaps it's time to move on and focus on other topic that the child could understand and that what the child finds significant in his or her life. Remember that when you are teaching learners with special needs, you are talking about the functional academics. You're talking about the functionality of whatever is being taught. So you would have to go back. What are the things that this child has to learn during adult life? What are the things that this child has to learn when he is already in his teens? So you take a look at all of these things, and you also take a look at the ability of the child. What areas is the child strong at? And you focus on the abilities. It's like anyone in this room. When you studied, there were some courses that you excelled in, and there were other courses that you were very terrible at. So some people are good in mathematics, some people are terrible in mathematics. The answer is like that. So if you need this to pass, if you need to pass your algebra and calculus course in college, you just have to pass it. Okay, you have to pass it. Never mind if you get the lowest score, for as long as you pass it. And then you won't be using it anyway when you are already an adult. So there are some competencies. It also depends on the competencies that are demanded by the local curriculum. If the competencies say that you have to pass this, then you pass it. If the competencies that are silent about it, that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to master it, and the course is non-graded and you are teaching children with special needs and you have exhausted your best effort, it would be best for you to teach another subject matter, another concept that the child would understand and the child would use. So it's about functionality. That is the importance of what you are teaching. It has to have some purpose in the child's life in the future.
Thank you so much for this wonderful insight put forth, ma'am. Now we have a question by Irene Fatima and a few others who want to know, can you suggest a few exercises for memory so that they can retain more information, especially for older children?
Okay, memory. That's very good. When it comes to older children, you will have to look at structure. So, for example, sometimes they have difficulties in memory because they cannot structure their notes well. They could not remember where they place their things. So, perhaps you should teach a lesson on structure, or you should teach something that would make them have sustained attention. You have to focus on attention skills first. Sometimes you have to focus on inattentiveness skills. You have to address that. If the child has ADHD, for example, you address the ADHD first and all of the issues regarding ADHD in order for the child to remember well. And then you make the lesson interesting for the child. Sometimes the children would complain saying that, you know what, I don't understand the lesson because my teacher is talking to the chalkboard. So it would be best for you to have lessons that involve movement. So you have a variety of lessons that you will teach your students. The key to it is to know the students, know their abilities, their and of course their weaknesses, and of course you also know the things that interest them, because when they are interested in learning, they will continue with the task. And when it comes to memory, we have discussed a lot of strategies to improve memory. So you have the rehearsal, you have there engage all the senses that are possible, you have here mnemonics, and if the children forget, of course you will make use of some notes and reminders for them in order for them to remember the activities that they have to do all throughout the day.
Knowing the child is very, very important, focusing on their strengths, and then the strategy could be built upon. We have a question by Esperanza Elmeneza and a few other participants who wanted to ask your view that do you think that food supplements like Memory Plus can improve memory? What is your take on these kinds of supplements that are available in the market?
Well, first and foremost, I am not a medical doctor. I cannot answer supplements. And when it comes to that subject matter, it would be best for the health professionals to be asked. So the health professionals to be asked on whether these supplements are effective or not. Of course, we are in the field of education and we take note of teaching strategies.
Many questions on those lines were there. Now we have another question on the strategy-based approaches, where Evelyn and Sandoval wants to know that is there any way or remedy to improve selective memory loss in children with special needs?
Well, with some, if children have an issue of selective memory loss, so that becomes a physical issue. That's a biological issue, and the best way, of course, is to try to make all the senses, uh, present the lessons, let the child use all the senses possible. But there would also be a time wherein if there is a physical condition present, there would be a time wherein, of course, the child will not learn the skills. So we have to focus on the other things that the child can do rather with what the child cannot do.
Finding on what the child can do really helps. And ma'am, when things have now shifted on, a lot of online learning is happening. A few participants like Sumaya Bhamla wanted to know that how can we gain attention from the child and help enhance their memory of children with special needs during the online classes?
Oh, that is a very good question because that is indeed an issue among our online learners. First and foremost, for the teachers, number one, you have to make the lessons relevant. So there was a question from me in one of the discussions that I had. They presented a very good lesson on popular media, and this character is so popular. If you ask people in developing countries, it would be very popular with them. However, that character was presented in a rural area. What was present? Carabaos and cows and goats. These children have never heard of that popular character. And of course, the lesson did not progress well. So, first and foremost is to make the lessons relevant in daily life. Second is to identify the competencies that are really essential. Third is to give the right amount of assessment. So, for example, how do you determine that your quiz is appropriate and can be answered within 40 minutes to an hour? First and foremost, write your test, and then leave your test for a few hours. Don't think about the test, just leave it, just shelve it. After 6 hours, 8 hours, get the test, answer the test yourself. If you have answered the test in 15 minutes, that means that your student can answer it in around 45 minutes. The key is you have to clock yourself, you have to time yourself the number of minutes or hours that you spent in answering the question. You have to multiply that by 2 or by 3. That is the amount of time that your student will answer the question. If it is beyond the time that is allotted, that means that you are giving too many items for your test. Also, what are the essential skills that have to be taught in the specific lesson? It's always important that you know how to chunk activities when you're talking about curricular and instructional design. You cannot talk about everything. So, what are the skills that are very relevant and apply these skills? This holds true for young children. Okay, it's a different scene if you are in college, wherein of course you have to learn as much as possible and you have to learn these skills, even if sometimes it is beyond your ability because you're talking about andragogy here. But when you are talking about young children, you have pedagogical views, you have to consider developmental expectations. Sometimes they are not able to focus because there are too many lessons given and too much quizzes given. The number of items is too long, and definitely they have the limited capacity to answer. And of course, they also have other subjects, other lessons that they have to answer, and the other tests that they have to pass. So all of these are affecting the motivation to learn. Sometimes it's not a question of memory, it's a question of motivation.
Finding the interest of the child along with it providing the right motivation is very, very important, especially when the classes are online. We have another question now, my Andrea Ellen, who wants to know, are there any techniques that parents or guardians can do at home to help their child with intellectual disability to retain information longer?
Okay, that is a very good question. First and foremost, practice is necessary. So you practice, and you practice. So practice is key in order for the child to remember. The key is to let the child make use of what is learned in practical daily life, what is learned from in the day-to-day experience. So you have to do that. And then number two, motivation. What reward system are you giving the child? Are there rewards for if the child would be able to remember the things that are being taught, if the child could apply the lessons? So that would come in as a factor. And always remember, the research on motivation states that people are motivated to do tasks if they have the agency to do it, if they are empowered or have the capacity to do a specific task, they will do it. So you have to give them the skills that are needed in order for them to do a specific task. And second, you have to sustain the motivation of the child in doing the task. For children with intellectual disability, you have to be very patient. You have to teach and reteach and reteach some concepts. And of course, there are times that they would forget what is taught. So we teach again. You have to be patient in helping them understand the concepts that are being taught.
Thank you so much for this lovely insight, ma'am, how you can deal with children with intellectual disability. Now we have a question by Princess Hosena, who wanted to know, do emotions affect the memory skills of students? If yes, what could be the possible solutions for the problem?
Okay, in the literature, you have academic emotions by Pekran. So you have their academic emotions. Academic emotions primarily affect the motivation. And of course, if they are not motivated to learn, if they have, for example, very hostile academic emotions towards a specific subject, they would not learn it. So when it comes to academic emotions, that would affect most probably the motivation to learn. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a memory problem.
To see what that goes and understand the child. So we have another question here by Assalam, who wanted to know that when we have been talking about the memory challenges, now we spoke about how memory can influence the other things. He wants to know how memory does memory influence psychosocial skills of children?
Well, it influences when it comes to procedural knowledge. For example, you are going to a party and you have here children with developmental delays. So what are the skills that you have for the party? For example, what are the events in a party? So that would affect psychosocial skills. Or for example, if you are teaching a concept such as dating, so you have the steps that you will teach them. If they have, for example, intellectual disability, you will have to identify the steps. So if the child, of course, forgets the steps, that would have some effect on the relationship. That would be the effect on psychosocial skills. Also, for example, if the child, if the child, for example, cannot remember birthdays, some of the friends might say, "Oh no, you don't remember my birthday." So there might be some sort of squabble or some sort of misunderstanding, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the child has poor psychosocial skills. So you have to first define what are the skills involved when it comes to psychosocial skills. So you have here emotion control, emotion regulation. You have here expression of emotions properly. You have here making friends. There are a lot of psychosocial skills. And yes, if you have a poor memory, it can affect in some ways, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have poor psychosocial skills when you have poor working memory.
It all depends on the skill the child has to develop. And we have a case specific question now, ma'am, by Shagufta, who says that she has a son of 13 years old and is on the autism spectrum. How can she help her child recall information once they are done introducing and practicing a concept with him? She also states that the child has limited verbal capacity.
Okay, yes, limited verbal capacity, meaning limited vocal capacity, limited ways of expressing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he has a deficit, he has no language. So perhaps there would be lesser ways wherein he uses words, lesser procedures to use words, or it would also mean that he has limited vocal capacity to say what he wants to say. So, for example, you could make use of alternative and augmentative communication strategies if there are limitations in spoken language. Second, I would go to the issue on how would you be able to retain information. The key here is to apply it in real life. The key here is to make the lessons that are taught in functional academics alive and significant in real life. So what is its application in real life. And then you have to specifically point out that these are the things that you learned in functional academics. You now know how to make change. And when you purchase in stores, you will need to pay and then they would give you change. You already know if your change is correct or not. Or for example, when you go out in the streets, when the lesson is safety, you now know, the child now knows how to use the pedestrian lane. So the best way to retain information is through application.
Practice and application go a long way in helping a child to remember any information. When we have been talking about a lot on academics, ma'am, we have a participant, Sherry, who wants to know that does poor reading comprehension relate to poor memory? What techniques can we use to improve the comprehension if memory is a concern?
Okay, that is a very good question. First and foremost, when it comes to reading, you need an achievement test and you need a formal achievement test because you will have to know which skill in reading is deficit. Okay, what are the skills deficit? So you have to find out the skills that are deficit first when it comes to reading. Second, of course, when the child has difficulty in recall, you have to analyze the answers. So it's difficult to give a concrete answer to this situation because, of course, when it comes to reading comprehension, there are a lot of factors that affect reading comprehension. Memory is one factor, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have poor memory or poor working memory. So perhaps it's poor working memory if you cannot recall the events that were read, particularly if it were a reading exercise of oral reading. Okay? Or it is an exercise wherein you would read something and then that selection is taken away from you. So perhaps that would affect your responses because you need your working memory in process if you have an oral reading exercise and the reading selection is taken away from you. However, when you read, when the test is on reading and you have the selection there, as you answer the questions, that is not an issue of memory anymore. That's another skill. And of course, the next webinar series, the next lessons on language and communication will discuss this matter.
Yes, as ma'am said, we have a lot of upcoming workshops on the English language development. You could stay tuned and register for those workshops. Coming to the questions now, ma'am, we have a question by Rajni Nair who wants to know that does high sensory needs affect attention and memory? And an extended question of this by the other participant, Sharmila Lee and others, is if a child spends 3 to 4 hours watching cartoons, will it affect their memory?
Okay, so those are very good questions. First and foremost, you have to know first the nature of the issue. So I would want to know first the level of working memory for both questions. What is the level of working memory when the Stanford Binet or the Wexler is given? Because I would only be able to give you a response if I know the working memory of the child. So first, working memory level, I'll give a C-level test. My second answer to that, I would also like to know the level of executive functioning. So if there are issues on executive functioning, if the child is watching cartoons for 4 hours a day, there would be an effect on memory, not because of the watching of cartoons, but because of the child having poor executive functioning skills and, of course, having a low working memory. So that would be an issue that we have to address, not necessarily the watching of cartoons, because you have children who are good in academics, who have good memory skills. They can watch cartoons for hours, and yet they are able to answer the questions that you give them. For example, I have a nephew who can watch a lot of things, but when you ask him his questions in mathematics and when you ask him procedures, he could immediately give you the answers. So it all depends on the skills, the level of working memory that is identified through a formal standardized test.
Sometimes it may not affect, but then it's all child specific when it comes to the memory skills. We'll take the last question for the day, ma'am. It is by Khadija Shamshurali, who wants to know that if a child has the short memory span and the child is not able to remember what the child had learned yesterday, irrespective of a lot of efforts, does it mean that the parent or the special educator should limit, or should they keep trying till the child reaches a certain level of achievement?
And that's a very good question. I would first look at the basal skills, and I will look at the IQ scores of the child based on a formal test. And if there are no formal tests, I would look at the results of all the assessments given. So I would first look at the skills of the child. And of course, if the child lacks the skills, and obviously you have taught and you have given your best, it's time for you to refocus your attention onto things that the child would be able to apply in daily life or apply in his or her vocational life in the future, rather than letting him or her solve, let's say, for example, quadratic equations. That the child could never solve the quadratic equations. He could not learn the multiplication table, more so solve quadratic equations. So, or what is a parabola? So, these things. So, you have to consider the child, the abilities, the limitations. You also have to consider the resources. When you have a child with special needs, as he or she grows older, what would be the vocational skills that are needed? And when I say career skills, these are skills that are needed throughout life. Because in the literature, career is not limited to the jobs that an individual would have. Career would refer to different life choices that you would make. It would depend on many life choices that you will have to make. Choosing, for example, on having a family or not is a career choice. Choosing where you want to spend your retirement is a career choice. So I would look at the child. What are the abilities? What are the limitations? What are the resources available? What are the career plans of the child and the parents? And I would look at all of these in order for me to plan a specific curriculum for this child with special needs. So it is dependent on a lot of factors. It's not solely dependent on memory skills.
A
Appropriate. Okay. Yes.
holistic understanding of the child is very important. And then we have another request, ma'am, for a question by Jigme Wagchuk, who wants to know that the child is of 10 years and cannot copy the sentence correctly. Would this be related to memory, and how could this problem be solved?
Or that there could be a lot of factors related to that. You will have to give the full battery of Stanford or Wexler in order for you to make conclusions. And of course, you could use other tests on top of that. Similarly, for the question on the appropriate age to get an IQ test, it depends. If there is a problem, you get an IQ test. For a child who is 2 to 4 years old, WIPSI, Wexler Preschool and Primary Intelligence Scale, or the Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale version 5 for this. And you have to use this test in order to check on the profile of the child. It cannot be answered simply by stating, oh, these are the things that I have observed. These are the things that, these are my inputs. You need to have more inputs. I would interview, for example, the parents. I would look at the child on the mistakes that he or she she does. I would look at the portfolio of work that the child has. I would look at the duration and frequency of the specific issue. Does this happen in a particular language? So there are a lot of things to be considered before we can make any recommendations on what the child's condition really is.
Yes, and to know that sometimes the assessment is a very important to give you a better direction as to how you could help the child ahead. Yes. Now, I would like to thank Dr. Grace for this enriching session. The chat box is filled with a lot of positive gratitude and comments for you. And thank you for patiently answering all the queries that our participants had. Would you be sharing any last words for our participants, please, Ma?
First and foremost, I would like to thank you. Thank you. Of course, I would like to thank first the Everity team, Lily, Shivani, and of course, Revity for hosting today's presentation. Next, my heartfelt thanks to all the participants because without you, this webinar series would not be successful. Thank you very much for having that hunger and quest for knowledge. And in the Philippines, we would say mabuhay. That means long live. And I hope that all the teachers would be empowered to teach the children with special needs. Let's always focus on the abilities of the child because you will never know what the child would become unless you explore the abilities, unless you patiently teach them. Of course, memory is one aspect, but it's not the be all and end all. It's just one aspect of the curriculum of what is supposed to be taught to the child. There are many things that you can teach the child. If the child has deficits in one area, then look for the other areas wherein you can teach the child. So together, let's make a good future for these children with disabilities. And indeed, with pooled efforts, yes, these children can become someday. So with that, I'd like to thank you for all of the participants who came and actively participated in the chat. Thank you very much, and I'm wishing you have a wonderful weekend ahead of you. Happy holidays to everyone, and thank you very much. Until the next FBT series. Bye, and thank you.
Thank you so, so much, ma'am. It is very important to believe in children. The moment you believe, they can achieve greater heights. Before I end, I would also like to remind the participants about the upcoming events. On the 16th of December, we have milestones and prerequisites for English language development. On the 21st of December, we have developing listening and speaking skills in children with special needs. It will be taken up by Madam Geeta Gopi N. The link for it would be posted in the chat box now. Do register and book your slots. See you all at the upcoming workshops. Until then, it's a big bye from Team Ability. Take care and stay safe.